The floor is open. Dr. Ellis.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and Happy New Year to everyone. And yes, I have grown a mustache since.
Okay, so this committee, sir, I had it on mute the whole time. I got to get back into this. Sorry. Thanks for watching, everyone. Now, this is a conservative call, meeting requested pursuant to Standing Order 106, Bracket 4, to discuss a request to undertake a study of a contract between this company and Government of Canada. Now, this company was basically... I'm going to give a little bit sit rep for you people. The basically is what happened, to my understanding, they'll salt this and comment on the side if you disagree, is that the Liberals had a deal with vaccines with a country, and it fell through right in the beginning. And if everyone remembers, we were behind in the first month on getting vaccines, and that was like with the deal with China fell through, or with a Chinese company or whatever with the vaccine. Now their vaccine wasn't good enough or whatever, right? It wasn't like, and I don't know, and everyone's comment on the side. So if everyone, like I said, everyone recalls, we were all behind. We were behind on how many vaccines Canada had, but towards many countries. Like there was the count, if everyone remembers the count, who's got the most vaccines. Well, Anita Anand took over, a Liberal MP, and I think her strategy was good. And basically she did which in the lawyer speak, pardon the pun or whatever, shotgun approach. And it was basically like, okay, get everything. We're going to get everything on the market. We're going to double buy because there's only 40 million of us. We're going to buy all kinds of these things. So we are going to put the Canadians ahead of the line of all these countries who aren't as wealthy. And, it's business tactic, not very nice, but being a Canadian, yeah. And one who wasn't, at the time it was all about getting the vaccines. We got that worked. Now, what happened here, it seems, I don't know 100%, please comment, that the deal, there was 150 whatever meal that these think tank group lab was going to make a vaccine. It didn't get approved, so that money, it didn't get approved. So the government put money forward toward it because of like I said, the approach of everything, grab everything on the market. Because at first we got caught. China said, no, you're not getting it. And maybe the vaccine that they had wasn't good enough. Maybe that was, I don't know. But that was the deal. It fell through. And then we're like that. And Russia wasn't giving us any. We didn't have any of our own manufacturing. It was coming out of Germany. So this seems like quite a bit of money spent. And the Conservatives, being the prudent fiscal managers, want to look into this. Definitely want to look into this. Okay, so let's listen to them. And the doctor with the mustache has done he does a good job explaining this, better than I will. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of the liberal side of it, or the explainer as I see it, and we'll learn what's happening. Well, at least I'll learn what happened more about it as we go. Okay, so thanks for watching, and let's hear.
You last saw me, so just to clear up the any confusion there may be. That being said, the reason we're here today, of course, is a much more serious topic, and that is the topic of $150 million paid to Medicago and Mitsubishi by the Liberal government. The concern that the Conservatives and I believe, I will not speak for Madame Vignola, that the Bloc share, as they did sign our letter of concern in the 1064, is, of course, the fact that when we read the redacted contracts, which we've been provided with, and remember, a matter of public availability, what we don't see there is the reason why $150 million was provided to Medicago. And what we heard from the Minister of Health and the President of Medicago was that this is a requirement under the advanced purchase agreements or something similar to that. And when you read the redacted contracts very clearly, that is not there. Therefore, the concern that we have is there a problem with the veracity of the testimony given before this committee by the minister and the president of Medicago, or is the problem related to the fact that the unredacted copies of the contract and among other valuable items to which we at this committee have not been privy, that we know that those potentially may shine light onto this very serious issue of loss of $150 million. So with that being said, we thought it important on an urgent basis to get everybody back. I think that we all know the story of what has gone on here, that Medicago had a partnership with Philip Morris International, which therefore, because of the WHO's and the framework on tobacco that was also signed by Canada, therefore the WHO rejected the vaccine which was created by Medicago, which was because of course Philip Morris International was one of the partners associated with this development program. The difficulty that happened thereafter, of course, is that not only did the federal government provide Medicago with $173 million in startup costs, and when they closed, 600 jobs were lost in Quebec. The vaccine was rejected by the WHO, which Canada really wanted to give to the COVAX program, which is an entirely different story. Of course, Canada being the only developed country that took vaccines from the COVAX program because of our slow start with respect to getting domestically produced vaccines. And therefore, what we became left with was the fact that indeed no vaccines were produced by Medicago, in spite of the fact that multi-millions of dollars were provided to that company by the Trudeau Liberals in conjunction perhaps with their NDP partners. But that being said, we do know very clearly that no vaccines were delivered, and Canadians were then on the hook for the full bill with nothing to show for it. Thereafter, of course, Medicago closed its operations, and strangely enough, what happened thereafter was suddenly, in a very thick tome put out by public accounts, what we saw was under a curious heading called losses, and I quote this, losses of public money due to an offense, illegal act, or accident. In a 4-inch tomb, 3/4 of the way down, this $150 million was buried without any explanation. And because of that, we did, of course, bring the president of Medicago and the Minister of Health to committee, which sadly did not shed any light on the particular problem. And then that all, of course, sent us home reviewing the contracts and trying desperately to understand why another $150 million was paid. When the president of Medicago appeared at committee, he also stated very clearly that his company owned the building, it owned the machinery inside it, and it owned the intellectual property. Now, some of those things have changed since. That being said, that was his contention back last spring. And here we are now having the taxpayers of Canada on the hook for over $300 million. And it also, I'll be perfectly transparent here, that there is an unverified story that says that the parent company of Medicago, Mitsubishi, multi-billion-dollar multinational company, paid $40 million back to the government of Canada. And once again, it becomes unclear as to why that happened. And what we're asking for here on behalf of the taxpayers of Canada is for clarity so that they can understand why their hard-earned tax dollars in a fiscal environment which has seen inflation soar to 40-year highs, in a fiscal environment which we see them every month being $200 away from insolvency, in a fiscal environment which sees that mortgage costs have doubled, in a fiscal environment which sees rent has doubled. They are unable to put food on the table, a roof over their head, and as we see in Alberta, barely able to keep the heat on. So those are the reasons why we find it incredibly necessary to call an urgent meeting of the Standing Committee on Health to hold all of those people to account for their actions associated with this particular loss of $300 million plus of taxpayer hard-earned money. So to that end, we do have a motion to put forward to this committee, and I'm happy to read it out. It's rather lengthy, and I will start with saying that pursuant to Standing Order 108.1 open bracket A close bracket, this committee ordered the production of unredacted copies of the vaccine supply contract between the Government of Canada and Medicago Inc. dated 13th November 2020, and the committee orders the production of all contracts between Medicago Inc. and the Department of Innovation, Science and Industry under the Strategic Innovation Fund regarding the development of COVID vaccines and the capital investment in Medicago's manufacturing plant. And the committee orders the production of all contracts between the Government of Canada, Medicago, and the Aramis company regarding the transfer of ownership of the former Medicago plant and the transfer of the intellectual property of Medicago's COVID vaccine. Further, the committee agrees to a study of at least 6 meetings to examine these contracts and that the following witnesses be invited. Minister Mark Holland, Minister of Health, Minister Francois Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Assistant to the Deputy Minister of the Strategic Innovation Fund, Department of Innovation, Science and Industry, officials from the Public Health Agency of Canada, the President of Medicago, the President of Aramis, and any other witnesses deemed relevant by the committee, and that the Standing Committee prepare a report with its findings for the House. I do have that I could email that to the clerk if that would be helpful, and then it could be distributed. So those are the concerns. I think I've tried to be fairly concise in outlining them. I know we haven't been at committee for a while, so I thought it germane to bring forward those issues and make sure that the millions of people watching understand clearly why we need an urgent meeting to discuss the loss of funds and what the requirements are moving forward to understand very clearly where the $300 million went. With incredible transparency, we asked this committee to consider this motion. So, Chair, I will stop there. I do apologize for not being there. I was on an airplane this morning. Sat on the airplane for an hour, and then they decided that they decided I didn't need to be in Ottawa with you, Mr. Casey. So I apologize for not being there, but there was no flight out of Halifax to get me there. So with that, I will leave it. And if please give me instruction if you'd like me to email that to the clerk.
Okay, so that was
yes.
fairly
First of all,
long intro, but it definitely everyone's fully aware of what he's a very good MP. He's at a Halifax, which is very liberal country. I guess you have to be pretty darn good to break into that part of the country for being a conservative and all. It's very liberal arts area, and I think I said he's not a sensationalist minister of parliament. But definitely, when I like to say like brass tacks kind of Minister of Parliament. And now we have Perkins coming up. MP Perkins is the I can't say it that way. He's like the old wise guy. And I don't mean it like in any negative connotation. I was going to say old wise man, but that sounds bad. But he is a chair of a lot of committees, so he doesn't get a lot of chance to do his partisan thing. He's a very balanced chair. I have a lot of deep respect for him as a politician. Because there's sometimes he does MP Perkins. First of all, I like the restaurants. I don't know if he has anything to do with them, but he has a little bit of humor, but he definitely gets serious. Sometimes he gets a little heated, but I've never seen him go what I would consider over the rails as I have or many others. Just an excellent, as I consider, a minister of parliament who tough when needed to and amusing when not. Okay, so this is this part. Here he is giving his
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Happy New Year, everyone. Good to
we're
see
about
you
15
all.
minutes behind,
I too
and we're having
intended to
another
be there
break.
in person, but had the same flight issues of Mr. Ellis. So I'd like to begin, particularly for those who aren't following and maybe not as familiar with the issue as the members around the table. In November 2020, the Liberal government of Canada signed, within 5 days, 2 contracts with a firm called Medicago, based in Quebec City, which was owned a majority by Mitsubishi Chemicals, the largest company in Japan and the 43rd largest company in the world, and minority ownership, the Philip Morris tobacco giant. They signed 2 contracts from 2 different government departments. The first contract was a contract from the industry department, known as the ISED, but their minister's title is the Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry.
I'm going to pause for a second because, hey, it's my channel. That's a great comment. I like this. I don't know who this is, of course. Try not to notice who is writing on my thing, though other people like to. Wolfhound says, when is the nonstop geoengineering with nasty chemicals going to stop in Canada? The sun's energy is being blocked and suppressed, which is destroying the hydrological cycle. Now, this is something I've never even heard this angle, but the hydrological cycle is it is a cycle that it has been contaminated in many things in areas, because the hydrological cycle it's like AOR, area of responsibility. It's not necessarily it's a worldwide, but it's very microcosm. So there's a lot in that comment, a lot more to unpack, and I just wanted to highlight it and thank you for that, Wolfhound, the geoengineering, which I don't know about the chemtrails or anything. I just know that the hydrological cycle, the hydrocycle, the water cycle, it is something we that's something that should be focused on, and that's how you can tell an area. You can tell just the water, because the water gets like sand everywhere. Sorry, I apologize for that interjection, and let's listen to the professionals.
To develop a non-mRNA COVID vaccine, and part of that contract was also a contract to provide capital upgrades to the plants, but primarily the money was to develop a vaccine that was yet not developed or invented. That contract at the time was worth more than $220 million. 5 days later, the Liberal government of Canada signed another contract with Medicago to purchase the vaccine, which had not yet been invented. That vaccine contract stated that the initial batch would be for 20 million doses at a cost of approximately $30 a dose, or $600 million, if the vaccine was invented and managed to get through all the approval processes. Well, Medicago did invent such a vaccine made from a derivation of the tobacco plant, and it received Health Canada approval in February 2022. By this time, the government of Canada purchased several hundred million doses already of alternative vaccines from other global providers. So shortly after that, in December, Mitsubishi bought December 2023, Mitsubishi bought the entire company, and about 6 weeks later, shut Medicago down, putting more than 400 people in Quebec City out of work. The president of Medicago appeared before this committee at the time under questioning and said Medicago owned all the intellectual property that was paid for by the taxpayer to invent this vaccine. They were in negotiations, they said, and as did Minister Champagne, said they were in negotiations when questioned about who owned the intellectual property that taxpayers paid for, and that the government never received a file of. So while they contracted for 20 million doses, by the time it got Health Canada approval, the government no longer, according to the Minister of Health's testimony before this committee before Christmas, no longer needed that vaccine. So we have a situation here that may be confusing to people. So just shortly after the Minister of Health appeared before this committee, the government made an announcement. In fact, I think the announcement was on December 8th, on a settlement with Medicago. And that settlement was that Medicago would pay back $40 million of the $220 million contract signed with the Minister of Industry. So that contract actually ended up only being, I think it was $173 million that was spent out of the 223. They were paying back 40 million of that. And the minister's press release says that was mainly to deal with the capital investments to renovate the facility in Quebec City. It wasn't about a payment, supposedly, to get back the intellectual property. They also announced in that, though, that Medicago was being generous, that they were going to give the plant to a group of local managers, along with the vaccine intellectual property that Canadian taxpayers had paid for. They were generous in saying that Canadian taxpayers paid for the development of that vaccine, so we're going to give it for $1 to a company called Armus, a new company that would take over the asset of the plant and the intellectual property, made up principally of former employees of Medicago in Quebec City. And so the big kicker in that announcement was that the government was going to pay, in addition to all of that, Mitsubishi Chemicals, the largest company in Japan, $150 million. And the questions at the time were, well, what was that $150 million for? And was it a penalty because we didn't buy the actual 20 million doses of the vaccine? But officials, Ms. Jeffrey from the Health Department and Minister Holland, when they were both before the committee, called this $150 million was an advanced payment out of the vaccine purchase contract. That's the term they used. In fact, the president of Medicago before this committee, shortly after that, I think the week after that, used the exact same term, $150 million for an advance payment. Money's gone, sunk cost, advance payment for the purchase of the 20 million doses of the vaccine, of which the government never received a single vial. This contract, and it's a public contract, a public redacted contract, was released to the Public Accounts Committee. And I've gone through that contract. There is no term advance payment in that contract anywhere. There is no clause in that contract for advance payment. What it does say in the redacted version in clause 8 is that payment will be made in accordance with the basis of the payment schedule in Annex B. So when you go to Annex B, it's an interesting annex to read. It says payment gets received only when the delivery, and there's a delivery schedule, the delivery of the vaccine actually is in the hands of the government of Canada, then check gets cashed. There is
You've
no
been
discussion
Perkined.
in this contract and no commitment for an advance payment. Nothing. But you know what the kicker of that Annex B is? It's clause 4 of Annex B, which is the right to reduce the quantities. The government of Canada under 4A may give written notice to the contractor to reduce the number of doses ordered by Canada, which clearly the government of Canada went from 20 million to 0. Clause B of Section 4 of that annex of the contract says, if Canada gives notice pursuant to A above, the contractor will have no claim for further payment. No claim. So we have the Minister of Health and Officials. We have the President of Madacago appear before this committee saying that the $150 million was a payment for a clause that does not exist. In fact, in the contract, it contradicts that and says the government of Canada owes no money if it reduces the payment. So what is the payment for?
Okay, whoa. So the Conservatives here are saying, the way I see this personally, I do believe that we were all and everyone involved was a bit of a panic, and maybe poor decisions were made because of this. So I on this issue, I would like to give them a little bit, but now here's the but. The Conservatives, being the outstanding fiscal managers that they really are, that's their forte. Not very ingenuitive people, but very good at fiscal management. They're P's and Q's. Noticed something in the contract that they may not have had to pay. Now, this is something, a business versus a government has more incentive to work a lot harder because the business can be closed down due to money. So a lot of times the government does lose on contracts, a little bit here, a little bit, overall I think it's a good thing. But this seems like the Conservatives found another example of a contract where the companies had some pretty darn good lawyers. Like they were at the figures, these fellas. Now, we'll have to see the liberal side of this, but this is juicy. This is what politics, personally, to me, is about. It's about half-bads, But what do I know? Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Minister said in committee, because he never read the contract before he paid the $150 million, he said in response to my question, he hadn't read the contract when he signed off on sending the largest company in Japan $150 million. And if it's not that, because he didn't read the contract and he swore it was an advance payment that was in here, and the president of the company said it was advance payment, they both misled this committee. They misled a committee of parliament. So Mr. MP Ellis's motion, Dr. Ellis's motion says there's such contradiction here, we need to actually do a study and get to the bottom of this. We need the Minister of Industry to come to this committee and explain why he either paid out over $173 million of taxpayer money to develop a vaccine which he didn't own and didn't put the contract provisions or have the smarts to put in the contract he owns. He also then may have been involved in a discussion, because he said publicly he was in a discussion with the company on the terms of repayment of this and the intellectual property, and they came clearly to another deal that said, we're going to give you $150 million of taxpayer money.
Okay, so this seems that MP Perkins is trying to put this, and no, he's not trying. He's putting this blame or the questions. He wants to have the questions answered by Liberal MP Philippe Champagne, who is he's pretty he's smart. He's been very smart and has been put in a lot of tough positions for the Liberals over the last 8 years, and come out smelling fairly good. And there's been talk that he is going to be a potential Liberal leader. If when Trudeau leaves, eventually he will. There's been talk. His name has been put forward, and I think so. This is basically a look into some of the dealings, maybe of this minister, I believe. Thanks.
On a clause that doesn't exist in the purchase agreement. We need to see the contracts from the Strategic Innovation Fund that the Department of Industry signed, the contract that developed this vaccine, and see whether or not there's advance payment in there. Obviously, there's no advance payment for a vaccine that didn't exist. We need to recall the Minister of Health, the President of Medicago, to explain why they claim there was a clause in this contract to purchase the vaccines that does not exist. Why they didn't abide by the contract, which says the government of Canada doesn't owe any money if no vaccines are ordered. We reduce the quantity. What is it? It looks to me like the government of Canada is one of two things. Totally incompetent because none of them ever read the contracts and just accepted and wrote checks. Two, they have actually paid the intellectual property twice. They paid $173 million to Mitsubishi to develop this vaccine, and now they're paying them another $150 million for apparently technology we already own. So what's the basis for that $150 million? The only way we're going to get to the bottom of it is if the contracts under the SIF program that were signed by the industry minister are made public, if the unredacted version of this contract is made public, and if the contracts signed between Medicago, Mitsubishi, and Aramis and the government of Canada on this December 2023 deal that paid the $150 million are made public so that we can find out why taxpayers have paid over $300 million for a vaccine that never produced a single commercial vial and gave it to taxpayers in Canada. Why is it? This is a massive scandal. I don't believe it's a political scandal in the sense that there may be Liberals involved, but to me it looks like a massive incompetence scandal on behalf of these Liberals yet again, who don't read contracts they sign, who don't read the payments of checks of taxpayer money they send to large global companies. This is outrageous to me. And if this committee does not have a vote for the motion that's here, it's voting for a cover-up. It's voting to cover up the Liberal incompetence on pissing away $300 million of taxpayer money when there is no contractual requirement to do so. Incompetence, stupidity, government waste. What's the reason? What's the reason that ministers came before this committee and claimed they were compelled to give that $150 million payment for a contract and a clause and a term that does not exist? Either it was intentionally misleading this committee or it was just sheer incompetence. So I can't believe that.
Okay, I agree here with MP Perkins here, and I like I said before, I agree with his style. He's saying this isn't a political scandal. He's saying more this is he believes is more someone made an error, and I think the Conservatives. This is my opinion. It means nothing. The Conservatives have they are in the polls crushing it. They're doing so well in the polls. It's now a chance for Canadians to see how are these guys going to lead if we give them the opportunity. And this is where I think a shift needs to be played, or they will risk losing their rather large lead. Because, how you get to somewhere isn't necessarily how you maintain that. And I think that this is an example of a good MP putting forward that, hey, you don't need to. We know there's little mistakes. We know that the Liberals were under a panic and money was a little bit, a lot of money was spent. It's just as much as World War II during the pandemic. So do we need to get everyone totally livid and angry, or we just need to just keep recognizing and say, well, maybe next election I'll look at the other guy. That's all I believe they need to do to maintain the lead, where the Liberals have to come up with some masterstroke, brilliant plan, as the Liberals, this is their forte. They come up with some art of math to keep themselves in power. And if they can't, well, then there's no way that they can win, I believe. Okay, let's listen to Perkins, who I believe is doing a very good calm rant. Enjoyable.
People would be so dumb
Thanks for watching.
as to give out $150 million to the largest company in Japan without reading the contract and without verifying that in the bloody contract that it requires them to do so, which it does not. So I call on members to vote for MP Ellis's motion so that this committee can get to the bottom of this $300 million scandal of this Liberal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Dr. Hanley, please.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I've certainly been waiting with bated breath to see why we are being called out of our constituency times 2 weeks before Parliament begins, and what is the urgency behind this study. I'm not sure I'm any further enlightened now than I was. In light of a Medicago study that actually is still ongoing and still open, and also, I think, in light of 1064s that have been called in other committees. So I think that there are some tactics going on, and I'm frankly quite worried about whether we are going to see progress in the studies that we have as a committee committed to already, chiefly the women's health study and the opioid study that we had, as I understood, an agreement to pursue. We are all for transparency, and in that light, I do have some amendments to propose. I am not in favor of spending 6 meetings further on this when we already have had meetings on Medicago. It has already been before Public Accounts, and if there is a desire to review contracts, then I think we can support that, but not in favor of further derailing the incredibly important studies that we have on the docket waiting to go when we actually come back into session the week after next. So in that light, I would like to move an amendment, and if you indulge me, the amendment will read as follows, and we will circulate this in English and French. The amendment will be that the motion, the words be deleted after the words dated November 13th, 2020, that the rest be deleted, and the following be added. And the following will be that when these documents are received by the clerk, they be available at the clerk's office for viewing by committee members only for 1 week, to be designated by the committee no later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal, mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room that week, and that no notes be taken out of the room. And so, to be clear, because I know this is a fairly substantial change, the full motion would read that pursuant to Standing Order 108.1, A, this committee order the production of unredacted copies of the vaccine supply contract between the Government of Canada and Medicago Inc., dated November 13th, 20, that when received, that when these documents are received by the clerk, they be available at the clerk's office for committee members only, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the amendment I'm proposing, and we will, that amendment has been sent to the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanley. Is it the will of the committee to suspend briefly to have a look at the amendment before continuing debate?
Yes.
Can I ask a point of order?
A point of order from Mr. Perkins, please.
Mr. Henley's amendment essentially guts my motion, or Dr. Ellis's motion, I should say, and totally changes the nature and intent of the motion. So I'm not sure it's in order.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea for us to suspend, both for you to have a look at it and for me to take advice on Mr. Perkins' point of order.
Okay, he says Dr. Ellis.
Ms. Gladder?
Oh.
Yes. So if you decide that the amendment is in order and we're going to proceed with that, I just want to make sure that those that have their hands up to speak, there's no real way when you're virtual to re-put your hand up, and I just want to make sure we maintain the speaking order. Thank you, sir.
That would be my intention. The fact that if we, after the suspension, if we are dealing with the debate on the motion, the speaking order doesn't get canceled to start over again.
Okay.
All right, we stand suspended for 5 minutes.
They're going to go on a 5 minute here, and we're almost back. Double check the camera. So it looks like that. I went to Mitsubishi. Now, there may be other work that was being done that, because the contract is redacted, trade secrets, I would assume. There may be a lot more to this that we just as public can't find out. And it's frustrating sometimes, but especially if you're in the right and you're like, well, we can't say anything. So, but we may find out more about this contract. But so far, it seems that Dr. Ellis and MP Perkins have a, something going on. But they have a motion, and the Liberals, it looks like, well, the Conservatives have said, they're like basically, like the word as much, gutting the motion. But we're going to see, the other. Okay. Just trying to line it up here. So it was a very short break. It was under 5 minutes. The Conservatives are, there's 3 Conservatives so far have come up on the thing here, and I'm just trying to get it up. Okay, here. All right, we're back. And definitely, thanks for coming, watching, and here it is.
The scope of the motion is substantially reduced by the amendment. It isn't unusual for witness lists to be impacted by an amendment. The amendment continues to remain consistent with the spirit of the motion, which is the production of documents, and so I therefore rule it in order. And the next up on the speaker's list.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes, Mr. Perkins on a point of order.
Well, I respect the advice that you've been given. I don't agree with it. Dr. Ellis's motion talks about releasing these important contracts publicly, and talks about making sure that all of the contracts are available and open so that we can expose this. The amendment says that we're going to keep it secret. That's the opposite of what the motion says. The motion is about open and transparent contracts, putting the contracts in a situation where nobody except the committee members can see them, can't talk about them, can't do anything on their confidentiality, nobody in the public sees it, is actually the complete opposite of this motion. So I challenge the chair on your motion, on your ruling.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. So there is a motion to challenge the ruling of the chair. That is not debatable, and we'll go straight to a vote.
Okay, so yeah, this is a motion against the chair. Now, this is where, the Dr. Ellis is a MP of getting things done that matter. Now, this is something I'm become aware of very late in my age, that it's not necessarily being right, it's about knowing the procedures on how to get things done. Like, you can be right, but when you storm into someone's office and demand things of someone who's your superior, there's chances that you will be denied and they will find procedures why you won't be able to do it. So etiquette, use your etiquette, polite and P's and Q's, and sometimes be forceful. And this is where MP Perkins, this is like why the three of these is a very good combination. Because Dr. Ellis, he put forward a lot of the details, I believe, and then read it out and knows a lot of that. But the procedural to get it through, because the Liberals are very good at the procedural machinations, if you will, Perkins knows how to cut through a little bit and get at least an attempt on has his way. And then I think, I don't want to say comic relief, but the lighter side is their third MP there. And it's the human side is their third angle right now, this committee. So excellent. And now they're going to do a vote, and he is challenging the chair because he's saying, hey, we can't keep these contracts secret. We want to know what these contracts are. And the vote is going to happen right now. Get excited. Thanks for watching and commenting politely.
So the question for the committee is, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained?
So if you vote yes, you're agreeing with the chair. If you vote no, you are challenging the ruling of the chair. So Ms. Atwin?
Yes.
Mr. Henley?
Yes.
Mr. Joahi?
Yes.
Mr. Polowski?
Yes.
Ms. Sidhu?
Yes.
Monsieur Paulus?
No.
Mr. Ellis?
No.
Mr. Perkins?
No.
Mr. Majumdar?
No.
Madame Vignola?
No.
Oh,
Mr.
PQ,
Davis?
no.
Yes.
Oh, NDP went with the Liberals.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
So it is secret.
Sustained. The motion, the amendment is in order.
So, okay, that was just to see, apologies, if the amendment is in order. Now, the amendment, according to the vote, is in order. Law, stamp it, rubber. Like it or not. That's how our law is not necessarily. Yeah. So they have decided that they're going to now, I believe, they're going to now do the vote. But it looks like the NDP have voted with the Liberals on this, and we will not see the contracts. But funny, odder things have happened. It's Don Davies, the NDP, on this, and it's the NDP coalition thing going on. But let's see.
The debate is on the amendment, and Mr. Davies has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Happy New Year, everybody. Hope everybody had a chance for a restful and festive holiday season, and looking forward to joining you all in Ottawa as well. I have, I guess, a number of things to say. First of all, when Mr. Ellis was talking about this 106, I think he made a reference to the bloc signing the 106, and the implication was that the NDP did not sign it. One thing I think needs to be clarified for the record is that the NDP never saw this motion. we were not given an opportunity to sign it or not. Mr. Ellis sent a request for me to look at whether we would entertain a Section 106 motion on the BTNX data issue, not on Medicago. So I think that for anybody listening has to be clear that we were not invited to see this motion in advance, nor given a chance to support it or not. Second, I just want to say for the record, this once again I think is an opportunity for me to express my grave disappointment in both the Conservatives, frankly, and the government for opposing the NDP's motion moved at this committee.
Oh, yeah. See, here, sorry, I have to interject. Now, this is classic Liberal NDP, which I have always enjoyed. The one problem with the NDP is they've never gotten in power, but were always railing against the power, right? They haven't yet. Now, maybe someday. I always enjoyed it, but sometimes it gets frustrating. So this is why I understand Jagmeet Singh's policy. Oh, we got to, and Jagmeet Singh's, we want to actually have things that have the NDP stamp on it. It's so hard to get in power as NDP. And so when I was young, I used to watch them. The NDP, I remember she was from Halifax, their leader at the time. It was excellent. And she would just rail against everybody. But then after a while, it was like, well, when are they ever going to get something done? But the problem is they didn't have the power to. But the power of highlighting things that should be worked on is very powerful, I believe. Directing work is the way I see it. And who directs work? Usually the boss. You may not look like it, but that's what I always think of the NDP. Now, this is what MP Don Davies is doing, I believe, right now. He's throwing mud at everyone. He said, hey, we didn't see this. The old NDP. Though, which way he votes, we'll see, Let's watch. Thanks for watching.
And legislation that would have produced a independent public inquiry into all matters of the government's handling of the COVID pandemic under the Inquiries Act. And somewhat shamefully, I watched the Conservatives sit on their hands and abstain, which allowed my motion to be defeated. We would have a legislation before the House right now that would be close to setting up such a commission that would look at not only Medicago, but every vaccine contract. So when the Conservatives come to this committee and talk about transparency and disclosure, I think Canadians need to know that they prevented that very disclosure and transparency from happening, broadly speaking, on the COVID pandemic entirely. And that is a contradiction that I think needs to be stated for the record. The NDP's position on how the government handled the COVID pandemic and how it dealt with health-related matters is that we have been pro-transparency from the very beginning. We believe that taxpayers have a right to know how their money's spent, and parliamentarians have a duty to probe and to hold the government accountable. I remember Prime Minister Trudeau's statement when he was elected in 2015 that he believed in government that is open by default, and I think that's a wise way to approach it. That we should, as I think, starting point, be very open and transparent, and that's even when hard information, embarrassing information, mistakes are exposed. In fact, arguably, particularly when errors are made, I think it's important that we have an open airing in a democracy. Having said that, I can appreciate as well, having sat through many debates on this, and I moved the motion last Parliament to have disclosure of all the vaccine contracts, and to the Conservatives' credit at that time, through my colleague Michelle Rempel-Garner and other Conservatives, we did join together and seek and obtain vaccine contracts. But through that process, we were all made aware that totally unredacted contracts by commercial arrangements from the government is a delicate matter. I can appreciate that there can be certain commercial sensitivities, for example, price, when you have commercial vendors dealing with the government and multiple competitors are competing, they probably don't want their internal pricing structure to be known necessarily by their competitors. So I understand the need for some redaction. I will say that I think that that concept has been over relied upon by this government, and that's been, I think, unfortunate, because I think too many things have been held back under the guise that it's commercially sensitive when it really isn't. And so I think we have to be careful to strike that balance. So moving to this motion here as well, I have to also agree with my colleague, Dr. Hanley, that I fail to see the urgency in this. You know, a Section 106 meeting is a particular type of vehicle that's used that upsets the regular schedule that's all been agreed upon. And it, to me, as a responsible parliamentarian, it's used for when a matter of national importance that's urgent requires our committee's attention. And I would point out that we do have an open Medicago study that this motion could have been moved at any time during that or during our regular sitting. So I don't really understand why we're here on a Friday before in our constituency week, as Dr. Hanley mentioned. I'm talking about getting a contract. The issue is done. The contracts are there. They're not going to change this week or a week or two from now. We're talking about contracts that were signed several years ago. So I don't see the urgency. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is I think there's a line to be drawn between health issues and procurement issues. When I read this motion, I didn't get a chance to study it in detail. Obviously, we only got it this morning. But when I read this motion that was originally put before us and as amended, it is deeply delving into, I think, issues of procurement, intellectual property, and the financial transactions. We are the health committee. And, you know, there is an industry committee. It's already been pointed out several times. The medical contract was sought and obtained at the Public Accounts Committee. So we have multiple committees that are looking at this. So the question I have in my mind is this a good use of our time as Health Committee, particularly, as I will talk in a moment, given the competing priorities, because we can't deal with everything. We have to prioritize our issues. So is this issue to delve into, to have Minister Champagne, who's not even the minister responsible to this committee, come before us as we delve into commercial transactions and fiscal issues around procurement, important as they are. I will grant that to Mr. Perkins. He's done. I want to commend him for the deep dive he's done on this. He appears extremely knowledgeable about this. He's clearly read the contracts in great detail. It's not that they're not important. The issue is whether or not this committee's time as the Health Committee is this the proper venue for that. I find myself being unpersuaded by that. I want to talk about the competing priorities. We have a women's health study that's underway that's never been studied by this committee. So 50% of the Canadian population and all of the health issues that pertain to that are currently the subject of this committee. That would have to be postponed. Second, we have the opioid overdose crisis. And quite rightly, we listened to several filibusters before Christmas by Conservatives who went on and on at length about how critical the opioid overdose crisis is and how massively important it was that we get to that right now. So much so that they moved and we agreed to disrupt the schedule of the women's health study by interjecting meetings with the opioid overdose study, which, by the way, I want to commend Dr. Hanley for moving. It was his motion to put the opioid overdose crisis before this committee. We have many, many other issues of momentous importance of health in this country, including Indigenous health, including the fact that millions of Canadians can't see a family doctor. We have nursing crisis. We have issues of all types. We have a diabetes crisis. We have many, many issues to talk about. So the issue is, in my mind, I'm thinking, do I want to devote 6 meetings to delving into the Ministry of Innovation's dealings with with a foreign company on how they handle the fiscal arrangements about the transfer of intellectual property. I find myself saying that doesn't meet my priority, nor does it jibe with what I'm hearing from my constituents about what they want to see from their healthcare system. Now, fiscal probity is important. Financial accountability is important. Nobody wants to see waste. I think the Conservative motion is very, very good at raising the importance of those issues. But Public Accounts is looking at this. The Ministry or the Committee for Industry and Innovation, et cetera, can look at this as well. To me, I think that's the more appropriate place for it. Now, I also want to, I find myself unclear as well about what exactly has not been disclosed, because the Medicago contract was disclosed, I think, in largely unredacted form, if not unredacted form. I think Dr. Hanley's motion, if I'm not mistaken, I may be, replicates the conditions that surrounded the disclosure of the Medicago vaccine contract at Public Accounts. Mr. Perkins read some very pertinent, I think, sections of that contract that give us the information we need. I mean, there's an issue, I suppose, of whether or not the answers given by the ministers and the president of Medicago are consistent with that or not. But that's not an issue of disclosure. That's an issue of I guess, politics and satisfaction of answer. We don't need more content. The information's there and it's revealed, and Mr. Perkins was reading it. So I'm not quite clear what information remains unknown from the Medicago vaccine contract. I also want to say that Mr. Perkins, in his last intervention, said something about that the amendment that was made by Dr. Hanley is inconsistent with this, or it somehow gags us. I don't read anything in Dr. Hanley's motion that says that we can't speak about it. There's nothing in there that says, after reading that contract, that we can't come and speak publicly about it or raise it at this committee. The amendment says that when the documents are received by the clerk, they be available at the clerk's office for viewing by committee members for 1 week, to be designated by the committee, no later than 30 days, under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal, mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room. So that means you can't take pictures of it, and that you can't take notes out of the room. So that just means that we can read it, you can talk about it, you just can't take it. And I would assume that that's because we are going to be, even under this amendment, we are going to be allowed as committee members to read the full unredacted version of the contract, and we'll be able to speak about it. But what we don't want to do is disclose that, because we are, I would imagine, going to see commercially sensitive information. Interesting, I just want to say for the record, it's an interesting point in history. If the time ever comes where there is a Conservative government, I'm going to remember this day very, very clearly and make sure that any future Conservative government reveals full unredacted versions of all commercial contracts that they have with all vendors with the federal government. And we'll see if that happens. I did serve under a majority and minority Conservative government. I can tell you that was absolutely not the position of any Conservative government or Conservative member of Parliament that I ever saw. Quite the opposite, actually. So I just I want to say that I think that the amendment is a measured amendment. It allows us to see the unredacted version of the contract, which I think is a good thing. It allows us then to see whether there's anything in the redacted versions that might cause us to want to schedule more time or recall a minister. I want to say again, 6 meetings. Nothing I've heard today would warrant devoting 6 meetings. Better part of it, that's a month in the parliamentary calendar terms, to this, when we don't even really know if the unredacted versions are going to really indicate anything particularly profound or untoward. Maybe it will, but what I'd like to do is move in measured fashion, read the contract, see the unredacted version, and then we can decide as a committee if we want to, or individually, whether we think that there's anything that is worth putting back before the committee to study. And again, what I'm going to be looking for as well is whether or not I think this is more of an issue of finance, procurement, or industry, or whether it's a matter that ought to occupy the health committee's attention at this time. And once again, given the very, very pressing, urgent, frankly, fatal issues facing many Canadians while we talk. And where I'll conclude is this, is do Canadians want us to be getting on with the opioid study, where there's families right now who have loved ones who are dying today? I think the number is, 7 people will die in Canada today, if I'm not mistaken, from the opioid overdose crisis. Or do they want us to be delving into the minutiae of an intellectual property transfer between several companies and the government, when other committees are seized of the matter and are more properly mandated to deal with them? I would rather deal with the matters of life and death and health, pure health, that are before this committee, as opposed to that grandstanding to try to embarrass the government in many different ways. So I support the amendment, and I'll be voting in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Suite de Monsieur Paulus, à vous la parole.
Mr. Paulus, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, my colleague from the NDP spoke, and we don't really know why NDP is trying to block us from getting to the truth in all this. Because it has to do with how the government is managing things when we were dealing with the pandemic, with all kinds of contracts under the Department of Health that ordered the vaccines, and how those amounts, those funds were managed. That has to do with the Department of Health. So it has a connection with the Health Committee in that way. And there's always this mania of managing things in silos, and there's never anyone, one person at least, who is in charge of a holistic picture. So we need to get to the bottom of this, and our colleague from the NDP should side with the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois, so that we get to know more about this, about the utilization of public funds that just disappeared. So my colleague, Mr. Perkins, was also saying this. We're not necessarily talking about a scandal. We're talking about competency of management. So we just want to know what happened with the contract and why those amounts were spent. So where are we going with this? We have the amendment before us. Our Liberal colleague moved it. And then there's also the NDP, where I'm just trying to situate myself in all of this. But I think the issue at stake here is super important, and it's urgent. I'm in Quebec. I'm from Quebec. That's where it happened. Medicago was supposed to develop vaccines here, have facilities here. But the first scandal broke when we found out that after having received $173 million, the company was bought by Mitsubishi, and then there was this other payment of $150 million that was made without further us knowing any more about what was going on. So I think we are in a position where we have to shed light on what happened, why the money was paid, why the money did not come back. The government of Quebec also engaged in similar schemes, but they were reimbursed at 100%. So that was more efficiently done. But we have to understand why we're trying to beat around the bush, and rather than getting to the bottom of it.
Merci, Monsieur Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Paulus.
Dr. Pawlowski, please.
Yeah, I think we want to get to the vote, but having said that, I'm sufficiently ticked off about this that I want a couple minutes to speak about it. yes, this is an important matter. How the government spends public money is important. And that's why we're willing to vote for the opposition to be able to look at the contract. So be it. Go ahead. However, to bring this forward as a 106.4 motion, I think is a real abusive process. That's something that's urgent. These are contracts which are at least 2 years old. I remember, and those of us who sat on HESA throughout COVID will remember the fact that we had long discussions about the release of the contracts at that time. This is 2 years later. These are contracts which are already being made available to another committee, and yet some conservative in the middle of the night wakes up with this brainwave that, oh my God, what happened with those contracts and we haven't seen them. Let's call back HESA committee to discuss this right now. Well, is that really more important than, for example, the opioid study? I'd be far happier to be sitting here and talking about the opioid crisis, which the Conservatives were talking about over the last number of weeks. And as to Don's numbers, the number 6 came up, the Government of Canada website says 22 deaths per day. Is that worthy of calling back HESA? No, it doesn't seem to be, not to the Conservatives. They'd rather bring up this issue of the contracts and procuring contracts because that's more urgent. How about the women's study? And how about the things that we studied, like recommendations on breast cancer screening? Like, I don't know, thousands of women die every year from Canada because of breast cancer. You would think that maybe that would be something we would urgently talk about, but no, that's not urgent either. What's urgent are these contracts that are 2 years old. So I think it's a real abusive process that we're called back to discuss this. Is this more important? Should we put aside all those other things to study this for 6 sessions? Absolutely not. And you guys should be embarrassed for making this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Next, Ms. Atwin.
I'll cede my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Atwin. Ms. Gladue, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to clear up some of the misinformation and disinformation I've heard so far. The Public Accounts Committee is not looking at this issue. They are seized with other issues. And as I understand it, the Industry Committee is busy looking at the Sustainable Green Fund scandal, the problems with C-27 privacy bill, the Stellantis contract scandal. So they are also not looking at this. And I'm extremely concerned with the pattern of behavior I see with medical contracts. We've got this Medicago one, where clearly there were 2 contracts and there's been a $150 million payment to Mitsubishi that isn't mentioned anywhere in anything that we've seen. And so that's questionable. And this is on top of things like the Frank Baylis, let's spend $172 million, buy ventilators, never use them. And then where do we get the money back or sell those ventilators to do something like these kinds of things are happening all the time. And when the ministers come, we always hear they didn't read their emails. They weren't aware of the details of the contract, but there are electronic bank records that go with every one of these transfers. So I don't accept that we can't get to the bottom of where this is. And I also, would call that when the Liberals say they want to have transparency, but then they bring an amendment like what they brought, which is to say, okay, you can come and look at it. You can't take pictures of it. You can't record it. That puts us in a situation where, we see it. Mr. Davies has correctly said we could talk about it. But as soon as we say, well, the contract said this, and this is a problem, then the NDP will line up, as they always do, with their Liberal partners and say, no, it doesn't say that. And again, the public has no way of knowing what the truth is because there's no transparency at all. And so what I would propose to the amendment that's been made is a sub-amendment. The sub-amendment would be to take out some of the wording within the amendment. So it would be that when these documents are received by the clerk, they be available to committee members no later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts. That would be it, and I would mail that to the clerk so that he has it in both official languages. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gladue. So just to be, just for clarity.
It is a sub-amendment to the amendment.
I understand. You're suggesting that we add after the word only, so in the second line it says viewing by committee members only, and then to say not later than 30 days, is that?
Yeah, in the amendment, we would delete the phrase that says at the clerk's office for viewing by.
Okay.
That would go away. And that we would also delete after to committee members only, we would delete that. For 1 week to be designated by the committee, that deleted. No later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts, keep that in. And then under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal, mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room that week, and that no notes be taken out of the room, that whole part be deleted. So basically it ends up saying that when these documents are received by the clerk, they're available to committee members no later than 30 days following the receipt of the contracts.
Thank you. That amendment is in order. Do we need some time to see that, or are we ready to continue? Anyone require a suspension to have a look at the wording?
I think we're good. Keep going.
Mr. Chair, I'd like a suspension for 5 minutes. I like the process of sending it in writing to us so that we have it all in front of us in writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm inclined to agree with.
So they're having another break, and don't worry, we won't have to wait long because we're just about at live now. They have one more break and we're at live, and then you'll have to be forced to listen to me while they go on break. Or I'll put a video on for you. It'll be more liking to everyone. Again, thanks for watching, politely commenting, and we're back.
We are resuming. And next MP to take the floor will be Madame Vignola on the sub-amendment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I just want to do on the medical thing. I personally am a advocate for modern medicine. It's I think it's created miracles. It's the reason I believe why we have such a why we live so much longer than they do in in places that use traditional medicine. Though some things mild, this is my opinion here, some things that are mild, like you don't want to bother your doctor with, can be healed by herbal remedies. My thinking is, this is sorry apologies, but what I've only seen of my herbal remedies and stuff is they do work, but you have to be, like, I had athlete's foot before, a freaking gym, and what I found, you had to put it on 5-6 times a day. Whereas if I went to the doctor, I could have taken this pill, and it was like 6 months or a year or something, for a long time. But all I had to do is take the little pill. Whereas putting this Tannenbaum basically on my toes to cure that was a long time. It took a lot of effort, 5 times a day, and as like the Muslims, praying, as any good Muslim knows, it's an effort. Though it worked, was it modern medicine? I just wanted to put that point out there. This isn't modern medicine. MP Vigneault is discussing modern medicine, and let's see what we have here. And this is, I think it's pretty good debate, and they all have had, both sides have had a point, though, like most people, it'd be nice to see contracts, secrecy of contracts. Well, what do you think? Leave your comment aside. Medical beds are coming soon. The public system is overlooked. Wait times aren't safe. Yeah, I think that we need to put an effort into it, Mr. or Mrs. Alouette. Alouette, Mr. I would guess. Alouette, gentil Alouette, Alouette, gentil Alouette is a. I think that sometimes things don't need to be, can be solved at the lower levels, like the mechanical people. It doesn't. I think we get stuck as a society into always thinking that the top person has all the answers. Well, they do have a lot of them, but it takes a long time to get those answers. But at the bottom, there's a lot of people that have all these answers of small solutions that they don't have an opportunity to put their solutions forward. They tell their wives, and maybe it gets passed through. But I think, wait times and things like that, and secondary. I believe in secondary doctors, like stress. Stress is a big one, and if you can alleviate that, your doctor will have an easier time healing you, right? Because I know you go to a doctor's, and if you're stressed and agitated, it's hard to get the information. So, and additional, I would like to see more additional things. And another one, the I'm sorry, the name, the midwives for thing, that seemed like a very good, they do it in Britain. It's not very, here. It's just, I believe, to an assist to the professionals, not to be the be-all, end-all. So the doctor gets you when you've already been taken care of slightly toward healing, instead of direct. But that's just an opinion, so let's hear what Julie Vigneault has to say of Bloc Québécois.
Bloc Québécois, we signed the 106.4 without having been aware of the 108.1. So Medicago, it represents $150 million that were given to this company under public accounts, under a chapter that is quite mysterious. So one has to ask the question. And when I asked the question during a previous meeting, they told me, well, it's considered as an accident. But my questions will be in line with what has been asked by my colleagues, and all of our colleagues actually, because yes, we need to get answers. Is health the best place to get these answers? It's a good question as well. Because when we talk about women's health, for instance, there are 700 diseases that are misdiagnosed when it comes to women because due to a lack of studies on feminine morphology and just a lack of studies in general. For instance, breast cancer. Members of my own family are grappling with that, dealing with that. I mean, can some of these cases be snipped at the bud? Yes, that might be interesting. So I'm also not the only person to be dealing with such issues. But let's get back to Medicago. There are questions to be asked on the circumstances, on the guarantees. Definitely, that is the case. And there are questions on the procedure that was followed, why it was followed. And had Mitsubishi not abandoned Medicago, would we be talking about it now? Or would we have accepted the fact that the investment was made to increase the supply and the availability of vaccines in Canada? Well, I don't have the answer. Did Canada take a risk that it shouldn't have taken? I don't have the answer to that either. The fact that sometimes Canada is asked to function with the flexibility of a private company, does it lead us to what we're studying or what we may end up willing to study? I don't have the answer to that. Where did the 150 millions go? Research and development cost a fortune. Did it go to research and development, or did this amount of money help accelerate the construction of the production plant, which was going to take place in Quebec? I don't have the answer to that. Well, having answers to questions about taxpayers' money that is trusted to a government is the least we can do. When it comes to the sub-amendment and the the amendment and the sub-amendment, I'm still having a hard time understanding the thing about, yes, you can look at the documents, but you cannot talk about it. yes, you will get the truth, but you cannot share it, whether it's positive or negative. Whether it makes the news in favor of one party or the other, that's something else. But the electors and what they need to know, what they want to know, is what I have on my mind. It is important for me that people in our ridings know what we did with their money, their taxes. So we have to answer the following questions. Is the health committee, is it the best committee to do this work? Because we're talking about public accounts since the beginning, and new information that surfaced at public accounts. Should we send the motion there? Should we maybe think about our own procedures? I'm just asking these questions. I'm thinking out loud and without filtering myself. Mr. Chair, if the amendment is adopted, would it necessarily mean that the MPs will not be allowed to talk about what they will have read in public?
Merci,
Thank you, Madam Vignola. Next up, Mr. Majumdar.
Thank you. You know, I was listening to our NDP Liberal colleagues being inconvenienced by being brought before this committee to explain how $150 million of lost money by pure government incompetence are not.
Well, this seems to be a pretty good debate. A pretty good debate on private public health care. I could explain, Betty Zoom, how more people will die if it's pay. If you don't have enough money, then you can't get the medical treatment, and then more ailments follow. Thus, you won't. And we don't have enough doctors being trained right now, and this is really what it is. Because we don't have enough doctors being trained right now, the AI may help us, but since we're not having that happen, that means that there will be less doctors for those under the public healthcare system, and more, because there'll be more profit, more money to be made, the better ones will all go into pay. So what will happen is it just happens everywhere else. It's just very common. You get a two-tier system where there's second-class citizens because they weren't born in money, or the bank didn't give them a brilliant idea loan. They just weren't good enough people to get all of the money handed to them. And then second, they're not good enough people to have as good health as those who had. So what it does is it's compounding the hurts on those, right? And without an education system that's available to all, it's not necessarily everyone can get to university. It's not. It's you have to have a certain level of income or family support, family friend support to be able to go to school. Getting loans to go to university are not necessarily guaranteed. I was told when I went to school that I needed a cosigner, and I couldn't get a cosigner. I couldn't go to school. I had to join the military. I had college. I took a college course that I couldn't care less about. I wanted to go to mechanical engineering at the school I was approved to, and I had to go to college because I couldn't afford it. So this is a two-tier system. It's just not a very good. I do believe when you do have enough doctors and you have the medical treatment, these extra auxiliary assistance is what I believe is great. You have auxiliary physicians, as we should call them. The chiropractors, all these other people that are all surrounding the public system if you have money. But having doctors do this is my opinion. I don't know, and I don't know. Dr. Ski says just like Brazil. Oh, and just like Sweden. And look at the UK, the NHS. People say, "Oh, look at British people and their teeth aren't perfect." Yeah, well, because they have to have functional teeth according to the law, and even like people, movie stars or BBC stars, don't have Hollywood teeth. Because they take the government system, and so even wealthier individuals. So it shows when that system is in place that a lot of people take it. So Alouette, I'm sorry for interjecting, but this is really interesting to me, and I don't have much of a life. Doctors in Sweden who work in the private system have to also work in the public sector. Oh, that's actually that I'll let that make sense. The quality of care is the same, but in the private sector you get nicer amenities. Yeah, the machines, right? Sweden has a private option, and they are the gold standard. I don't know about that. Norway, gold standard. Denmark. I'm just Danish. I think that we really look at AI, implementing it. There's a doctor in the area who does a lot of consultations through a very expensive at the time now app, so you don't have to go into his office. He doesn't have to, and he can do his job mostly, right? So that, hey, you know what I mean? That helps the doctor, helps him take more patients and all this stuff, and that's what I think we should be really pushing for. Major assisting AI. Norway and Denmark have private options. Norway, Denmark also are very. See, this is the problem is we're not mixing apples with apples here. This is an apples and grapes, okay, and they're sour. Our side. Norway and Denmark have a you make $30 an hour at McDonald's. Yep, and don't believe me? Google. There's documentaries on it. Beautiful. So and there's also a lot of money towards, if you want to open a business, there's a lot of money. You can actually get basically what we would consider a welfare check, just to help you open a business for a long time. But they pay very high taxes, so it's the CEOs or the whatever, the super wealthy and the lowest paid worker, someone who goes to their 9 to 5er. There isn't such a huge gap as there is especially like in America. So us, it's not the same. They're very close. Here we have people making, I think $12 an hour is the minimum, but someone says $14 an hour, and then someone who works in the same company making $120 an hour. That's just such a large scale is why I believe in the system that needs to have at least all of the basics taken care of, up to dental, optometrist, all of that taken care of by having a secondary. I'm talking about healthcare, not a nanny state. Yeah, we should be working. Yeah, I would like to see like test states, like test hospitals, a few hospitals that are trying new options, and the country gets to have their 2 cents in that. That would be, I think, how we could move it forward. That's how innovation gets moved forward. There's a private option, and they have better health outcomes. So there's a very good argument. Alouette has some very good arguments. I just think it's a long argument. Yeah, it's great. Thank you for the comments. I think they're good. Barter system with the docs that have been let go. Ooh. Their paychecks aren't as great when you consider their cost of living. Alouette, you're talking about 15, 20 years ago. Our housing prices have blown all of that out of the water. We're way higher. Way higher. I can buy a mansion. In Berlin, about 40 minutes out of Berlin, 100,000, 120,000, and that's with the conversion loss. And outside of Berlin, and in Niagara, which is 2 hours from Toronto, through traffic, the lowest place is $500,000, and there's not even comparable. Like the houses aren't even comparable. One's like very, very small, and another one's a decent place to live with a 4-piece house. Those scales aren't the same anymore, and they have a lot of cheaper options. They have a lot of Asian options in their stores that we don't have. It's not the same anymore. Our economy and everything, cost of living is not the same. But that's my opinion. I don't know nothing, right? So sorry for interjecting again. Thanks for watching, and let's listen to the MP. Oh, sorry, I got him on mute.
A mortgage meltdown coming their way at the speed of a freight train. And this government, this coalition, is not interested in revealing the transparent facts around their incompetence of over $150 million. The carbon tax has been making life absolutely intolerable. I'm in Calgary. You have all seen the weather that we have to deal with here. So don't tell me and lecture to me why this is not a priority for my constituents. So I wanted to respond to some of the pablum I was hearing from some of our colleagues around the table very clearly. I think it's important to proceed to a vote. I defer my time to Dr. Ellis.
Well, that's fortunate because the next person on the speaker's list is, in fact, Dr. Ellis. You have the floor, sir.
Thanks very much, Chair. And can you just refresh the committee's mind here? Is there more speakers after myself, sir?
I have Mr. Perkins, followed by Mr. Davies, and that is the complete speakers list at this time.
Great, thank you very much. You know, it's interesting. You know, we have a country that's falling apart. We have a healthcare system that is crumbling before our eyes. As mentioned, there are 22 people dying every day by opioids, and therefore bringing a motion forward with respect to $150 million at Health Committee, which directly assesses the veracity of testimony given by the Minister of Health and the President of Medicago at the Health Committee, makes perfect sense. What better time to do it than when Dr. Pawlowski didn't want his vacation or his time with his constituents interrupted, nor did Mr. Davies. That really makes no sense to me. We're here to work on behalf of Canadians, and as Mr. Majumdar correctly pointed out, so many Canadians are reaching out to us. And listen, I'm sure they're reaching out to you guys as well, and gals, whether you want to admit it or not, that they are being crushed by the fiscal irresponsibility of this government. I find it laughable that Mr. Davies says, well, we didn't ask him to sign the 106.4 when he wouldn't sign a 106.4 which directly is related to a loss of $2 billion more because a company lied, Health Canada knew about it, and they accepted it as being true and moved forward anyway. So why would I ask him to sign a letter when he won't sign one for $2 billion, he won't sign for $150 million, and the results, of course, of the way he votes to gut this incredible motion that was before committee here today for transparency, which Dr. Hanley correctly said in his opening remarks. He talked very clearly about transparency and then introduces a motion to gut the transparency. Wow, talk about hypocrisy. Anyway, you know what? That being said, we know that there's an innumerable number of scandals. There's not enough committees to handle all the scandals this Liberal NDP coalition government is creating. And of course, there are not enough committees to attempt to address the fiscal incompetence that continues. Therefore, I'm quite happy to get to a vote so that we can ask everyone here where their cards are going to be laid and what side of history that they are going to choose to be on. That of competence, good fiscal management, or are they going to continue to be the costly cover-up coalition? That's the question that will be answered here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Mr. Perkins, please.
I'll be unusually brief. It's a simple question. It's a simple question. I believe the Minister of Health and the President of Medicago lied to this committee about the $150 million payment, about a clause they claimed existed that doesn't exist. This committee has the responsibility to call them back and call them on their misrepresentation to Parliament. Thank you.
Mr. Davies.
Well, in the spirit of trying to get to the vote, I can sense we want to move forward. I think that's a good thing. I have a couple of just brief comments. One is, one of the problems with the sub-amendment by Ms. Gladue is that there would be no controls whatsoever on confidentiality, and I'm a bit concerned by that. I haven't read the whole contract, but again, when you have a commercial vendor who is tendering with the government, I think there needs to be some, at least, examination or possibility of ensuring that the contract isn't just floated out in public without any controls on it, and I don't see those controls in the sub-amendment. The issue is, as well as I'm going to repeat again that my reading of this motion, and I think Madame Vigneault asked this question without an answer, but we can speak about it. We can share it, just can't reproduce it. And I think that's a measured step. I would also say to my colleagues, this isn't the end of the matter. I mean, once we read the contract, it's open to any member of the committee who has concerns about what they do see in the unredacted version to put forth another motion if they want, and maybe the time will come where a deeper dive will have to happen. I'm just not necessarily convinced that that's happened yet. Just to the motion of whether this is a priority or urgent, nobody's saying that this issue isn't important, or it's not even a priority. The question, I think, and I agree with Dr. Pawlowski, is whether or not this was urgent. And I don't think anybody can make a credible case that here on Friday, January 19th, that this issue was urgent to deal with given the context. We can debate how much of a priority is. I still will stand with the 20 people dying a day and the opioid overdose crisis as being a bigger priority than the nuances of this contract, as important as it may be. Finally, I just want to say, my issue with Dr. Ellis, I didn't know clairvoyance was part of his medical skills as to anticipate what I would or wouldn't agree to. Interestingly, when he asked me to consider a 106 on the other issue of $2 billion, which, by the way, has not been established yet, my only issue was that I didn't think it was urgent. I didn't think it warranted us meeting today to discuss that. So I may support it in the future or not. I don't know about his mind reading skills. But interestingly, if his argument is he wouldn't have the courtesy to show me this motion in advance because I didn't vote or didn't support one much larger, one might ask the question, why didn't he introduce the motion that he said he would on the much larger issue? If there's a $2 billion scandal, why didn't he introduce a 106 on the $2 billion scandal, not the $150 million scandal? So the logic there is as distorted as can be. So anyway, I'm happy just to go to a vote on this. I think this is an important issue. I think it warrants further investigation. I'm happy to support transparency. I'm happy to support all committee members to see the unredacted version of this contract, and I'm happy to see where it goes from there. And I think the attempt to frame this by the Conservatives that if one doesn't support their motion with all of the issues involved, like the 6 meetings and the involving the industry minister and all this, if you don't support that, you don't support
Yeah, I do see how MP Don Davies, he just has a name that has to be said in full. MP Don Davies is a politician. I'm finding myself agreeing with him. He's like, yes, we should look into it, but we shouldn't do this. And, he's doing some pretty good points, and I shouldn't have paused it. Let's listen to his points. And it looks like he may be voting for this motion. If possible, we'll see. Could this be the NDP breaching the Liberals' non-agreement?
Transparency and accountability is simply wrong. So I think this is a measured step towards more transparency, and I'm prepared to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. That exhausts the speakers list on the sub-amendment. So we're now, unless there are any other interventions, we're now going to proceed with the question on the sub-amendment. Just want to be crystal clear exactly what the sub-amendment is. And
this
the
is
clerk
the best
is now
TV, if you ask
revising
me. It's
the
phony.
last email that was sent out because it included a reference to the office of the clerk that I don't think was what Ms. Gladue moved. So my understanding of the sub-amendment is that it is to delete after the word available delete the words "at the clerk's office for viewing by the words room that we are received by following the receipt of the contracts, period."
Point of order?
Yes, Ms. Gladue, go ahead.
It's very close, but not quite.
Go ahead, please.
When these documents are received by the clerk, they be available to committee members no later than 30 days following the receipt.
Okay, so MP Gladue, who is, I would say, of the four of the Conservatives that are on, that I've seen so far, maybe there's five, making amendments in very measured ways, in exact terms. That's exactly it. MP Gladue is a very exacting. She has all kinds of degree, mining, like the miner's daughter, the traditional, whatever that story. I don't know if that story has any other negative, but she's, from an area, lots of great education behind her, and so she is an exacting, because as an engineer knows, a millimeter out on an equipment is a millimeter out. Carpenters, they can get up to a quarter inch out, right? Wood carpenters. But she is a metal engineer, carpenter, and exact. So let's see her exacting measuring.
Of the contracts. Thank you.
Okay. Is everyone clear on the wording of the sub-amendment?
Go ahead.
So they're getting, I guess, the translation on this. Now, a lot of times the translation takes time.
Only to be included in the sub-amendment. So the word "only" is there now. So does that remain? So viewing by committee members only? Yes or no?
No, only.
So that word
it could be viewed.
It's removed.
So that word should be removed as well. That's part of the sub-amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So
I'm sending everyone's version for everybody.
Is everyone clear on the wording of the sub-amendment, or do you want another email with the wording that we've just discussed? It's actually being sent as we speak.
Okay, so as you can see here, I'm going to do a little explainer. Now, the chair is voted in, and this is, I believe he's Liberal, Sean Casey, voted in. And so they don't know everything about committee rules. But there's a person, and the lady to his right, I believe is her, in this committee, is like the chief clerk of, like, say, the health committee, the standing health committee. And that person, their position, they're the one who knows the ins and outs, and if you can do this procedure and that procedure. So when a chair makes a decision, they also, as you can kind of hear, she's kind of politely whispering in his ear what the real things are, so he doesn't go, lack of a better term, off the rails of the committee. Or whoever the chairperson is, and so that's a job. It's a pretty damn good job, and I think they get paid fairly well for that. But a lot of times they start in that position, then they go up and up, So it's committees is something I feel is very important, and would be nicer if there was more highlighting of them. It's just the work of the politicians that we can see. So there's my little.
So my question for you is: are we ready for the question?
Yes, I think we should call the question.
I see nodding heads. So the question is on the sub-amendment. All those in favor of the sub-amendment, please raise your hand.
Chair, given the confusion, I think we should have a recorded division.
A recorded division has been requested, Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Okay, he tried to do it quick, and now they have to do it formal, so it's called a recorded division.
Mr. Henley?
Against.
Mr. Jory?
And exciting.
Mr. Polowski?
Against.
Ms. Sidhu?
Against.
Mr. Paulus,
Wait.
Mr. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Perkins,
Yes.
Mr. Majumdar,
Yes.
Madame Vignola, Mr. Davids,
No.
Five yeas, 6 nays.
Sub-amendment is defeated, so the debate is now on the amendment. Are there any interventions on the amendment? Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Heads nodding. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand.
Sorry, Chair. Once again, I'd like to request a recorded division, please.
A most reasonable suggestion that we will adopt.
I like
recorded
this
division
guy.
on the amendment, Madam Clerk,
This chair. See, this is. I guess people call it dry humor. I don't know. I find it like it gives me the lower cockles, the subcockle region of happiness. The way he says he's trying to speed it up. Just like put your hand up so we can get this through. It may be a little bit potential disaster or confusion for the clerk, but it goes faster instead of her calling out individually. But that's very much more exact. So he's trying to do that, and he decides to do that. Well, the Conservatives put out, they're like, no, record it. We want everyone to know which way everyone's voting on this to make it on the record, because that's what the opposition parties really what they want to do. Everything that could slightly look tarnished is on the record, or be twisted into tarnishment. So yeah, that was funny how he just threw that out there. He's like, yeah, the reasonable request.
Miss Atwin,
Here, I'm going to repeat it. I found it funny.
Suggestion. Please raise your hand.
Here's the side.
Sorry, Chair. Once again, I'd like to request a recorded division, please.
A most reasonable suggestion.
Most
We'll adopt
reasonable.
a recorded division on the amendment, Madam Clerk, please.
Miss Atwin,
In favor?
Mr. Henley,
In favor.
Mr. Jouari,
Support.
Mr. Polowski,
For?
Miss Sidhu,
In favor?
Monsieur Paulus,
No.
Mr. Ellis,
Totally against.
Mr. Perkins,
Against.
Mr. Majumdar,
Against.
Madame Vignola,
No.
Mr. Davids,
In favor.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
The amendment is adopted, and so the debate is now on the motion as amended. Are there any interventions? Seeing none, are we ready for the question?
Recorded division, please, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Madam Clerk, recorded division on the motion as amended, please.
Miss Atwin,
In favor?
Mr. Henley,
In favor.
Mr. Jouari,
In favor.
Mr. Polowski,
In favor?
Miss Sidhu,
In favor?
Monsieur Paulus,
No.
Mr. Ellis,
Against.
Mr. Perkins,
Cold.
Mr. Majumdar,
Opposed.
Madame Vignola, Mr. Davids,
Sorry. I'm in favor of the motion as amended.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
The motion is adopted as amended. Is there any further business? I see Dr. Hanley.
Okay, looks like that's
I
a
move
wrap.
to adjourn the meeting.
Will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Yeah, that is
I see heads nodding.
Nod,
We have
nod, nod.
consensus. The
They
meeting
got
is
it
adjourned.
through.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see
So
you
here we'll,
the
just-
committee to adjourn business.
6 yeas, 5 nays.
6 yeas.
I'm in favor of the motion as amended.
Mr.
Okay.
Davies? Mr.
So this definitely.
Mr. Henley?
In favor.
Oh, he looked. He looked.
Mr. Jouari? Monsieur Paulus? Mr. Majumdar?
The motion is adopted as amended.
Okay, so the motion
Monsieur Paulus?
is adopted as
Mr.
amended.
Ellis?
Against.
Mr. Perkins?
Gold.
Mr. Majumdar?
And that is the adjournment of the meeting.
Madame Vignola?
What do you think? Leave your comments on the
Mr.
side.
Davies?
We will not know. Boomer
Sorry?
Media is slapping or clapping.
I'm
Clapping is
in
much
favor of the
nicer.
motion as amended.
Trudeau himself has made his motivation
6 yeas,
transparent.
5 nays.
What is his motivation? What, Meyer?
The motion is adopted as amended.
Think so. I believe Trudeau ran on transparency. Yeah. Well, there is more coming out of ethics and stuff coming out for juicy for people like me. I find it juicy and interesting, but not something to get angry and upset over. Well, a little bit upset, but not more than when called upon it. When someone says, "Hey, are you upset?" No, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? But definitely heated, raised voice without, animosity. His motivation is the WEF agenda. Oh. Well, yeah, I think that's, I personally think that when 8 years ago, was what they got into power for, the international way of things. And right now we're having a little bit of a retraction because the people on the bottom are not doing so well. So there needs to be a little bit of a abacus out there, do some little calculations, I think. But Trudeau looks like he's their support is steady at what is it, 26%. It hasn't moved in months. I'm gonna Google it right now. But that was it for the thing. I'll put on a nicer picture for you. If you like. No, not that one. That's awful. Okay. Oh, not that one either. There's here we go. That's a nice House of Commons picture with the guy with a hat, the black hat. The polling. But thanks for watching. Have a good day. If you move on. Yeah, it has not moved. I didn't look at it in the last couple of days, to be honest, though. But last week I was very surprised at how steady it is, and that usually means a sign that it could shift back up for the whatever party. Things static are never good for whoever's going up. But yeah, it hasn't changed. I'm gonna pull it out. They're at 26%. Support, and they've been at 26% support, whereas the Conservatives at 14, NDP at 19. Now this is an aggregate poll. The PPC have been going down. They were at 7 at one point. Now they're at 3. The Greens at 5. They've gone up a couple. They were at 3 the last time I was kind of paying attention. But it's 99. 338 polls, which is, I recommend you check it out. It's an awesome site. They're an aggregate. But okay, so it hasn't really shifted. The Conservatives. Yeah. Well, they have, I would say, fifth month No, there's that drop. 6th month of last year. May, April, June, they've basically stayed on it. They've gone down, but they had a drop, but it bounced back up. But they're definitely at that's almost that's a long time. 6 months of last year, so 6-8 months, whatever, 6 months we'll say. They've been kind of sitting at these points. I love that picture. Oh yeah, there's of course a history. That guy, that hat, yeah, and you can see it's British Columbia, the White Cross, and with the drop of the PPC happened January of last year. The greens, of January of last year have slowly gone up. The Bloc Québécois, I would say they've gone up and down, but they're about the same. NDP have up and down a little, but they're about 20%. They've been 20% since Jagmeet Singh got in power. They have a very strong base with the NDP. I think that's their strength. They have a strong base, whereas the Liberal base, they have a lot of people who lean Liberal, but will leave them when they believe, when the Conservatives rack up enough negative media, I think, or whatever. So yeah, this is basically what I think. We're 40%, 14%. It's going on. Now, what are we going to see when the politics come back? Libs have no chance this time. I do never boomer media, and I'm not advocating for anyone, but I'd never count the Liberals out because they've been the natural ruling party of this country for so long. They have, I think they have a base that gets tired of them at times. They're like, you know what? Time for to change your party, people. We're going to vote for you after one round, so you guys can change up who it is. That's as much on majority because it's the predominantly ruling party. They definitely are the dominating one. So thinking that they're just out because the majority of people think. But the problem is a lot of people who will speak out against governments won't vote. They don't vote. That was the big thing that happened with Trump. These people that don't normally vote voted. So will the Conservatives be able to get those people out to the vote? Will the Liberal supporters just not go to vote? That's it. But if this is what I know I keep saying it. If the Liberals come up with some brilliant plan that everyone starts nodding their head like penguins, like in unison, yeah, like we all think it's a good idea, that could bring them back. But it has to be huge. Like we're talking $100 billion that everyone in the country agrees with. It's like close to a miracle, but no, not really. Or the Conservatives are going to, I think, continue to find waste of spending and do what they're good at. Fiscal management. I know, okay, boomer media. Jagmeet is taking the NDP with him. My father was a staunch NDP, and now he's 83. That was a good rhyme. NDP is, I like the NDP because I'm a pleb, below them, looking up at the NDP kind of thing, right? Like non-union guy. I know I'm 60. I've watched. Always the same old problems with the Libs, and these WEF Libs have no chance, my prediction. He's going to try the UBI for the poor people votes. Yeah, people have been talking about that in this universal basic income. That could do it. That really could do it, but I think that'll cost more than $100 billion. That's just outrageous. It's crazy. That would be taking it away a very large chunk of money, and I'm just debating with you a little. That it'll take a large chunk of money from the provinces that are paying. So I don't know that that would be such a hard program. But like I said, it's this whatever program they're going to put forward, it has to be huge, and that could be huge, and that would be very difficult. The dental didn't get many people excited, I think, because it hasn't affected everyone yet. The immigrant thing. I personally like the immigrants. I like the idea of an immigrant being one, or at least the generational one, right? But the problem is just the housing. And we can't, this is what I thought, just crush the market. But then you're crushing people's dreams, their money. So I believe that there needs to be an on-ramp for immigrants and first-time homebuyers. Somehow have a two-tier housing system, so people getting into their first house into certain neighborhoods, designated neighborhoods that maybe you don't want to necessarily move in, but you want a home, can go into. Because the real thing is, and we're seeing it in society, once home ownership makes you want more sense of a community, and once you feel out of the community, you're more likely to just say piss on it and do negative things towards it. And the only difference being you have an ownership. You can rent a home or own a home, and they almost look the same, but they're a whole different when it comes to community outreach and assistance of a person. And that's where I really believe the Conservatives are right on that. You don't have to be good. You'll become a little bit better by a home ownership, or condo ownership is more what people will need nowadays. People don't need lawns. I don't know. I'm just talking here. No UIB. Here it's a commie trap. Well, there's welfare already, so it's just like an added to it. I like the idea of it because it is a trap. It is a trap for the person who believes that there's an easy way out. But the rest of society may not have someone. The reason why they put into power, I may be wrong, but what I read this, when they put in the first old age pensions and money, it had nothing to do with helping the poor people. It had everything to do with stopping the amount of robberies that was happening. Robberies were crazy, pickpocket, everything. So wealthier individuals couldn't handle it anymore. They were livid. They were wanting to do dangerous, bad things to these people. Well, they're like, they just needed to eat that day. They were hungry. So what they decided was to give people a stipend of welfare, whatever, a little bit of money, so to stop that petty crime. And that's what it was for. And the UBI will be in the same, I believe, as that. It's just lowering crime. It's not necessarily helping that person, because we all know getting a check and then told to sit in a room and do nothing is not good for your health, mind, body, or spirit, right? Not that I know anything. You guys got great comments today. I'm one of the poors. Don't fall for the UBI. I'm sorry, that song. All these immigrants. I'm a pleb too. I'm telling everyone that's younger than me to reject it. The dental is a joke. Alouette, I am in the same boat. Middle class, and then the government happened. Yeah, the housing prices is just, I think it's just, But you can't destroy people's who are on retirement income. That they're looking at that beautiful nest egg, and I thought at first, hey, we got to help these young people, but I don't believe by hurting the whole economy of keeping those pricing houses is good. It's good for those people, but there needs to be an on-ramp to get in there. So a government program to build homes fast that maybe not everyone wants it. So sub-market homes is, I believe, the answer, not destroying the housing, because that's what's going to happen. If we do not fix this housing bubble, we call it the housing crisis. It's actually a bubble. They don't want to say the word. So the crisis is going to it's going to hurt a lot more of the plebs, right? It's not going to hurt the people who own 5-6 homes. It's going to people that maybe bought a home that a little bit out of their price range, and that's what bubbles do. And I believe to keep this, to reinforce our bubble of high housing prices, you can have an immigrant first-time home buyer on-ramp to assist that. Because there's a lot of money tied into our housing. That's just and people didn't do a thing to gain that money. That's fine, but it's money it could be used in the economy as people retire and downsize and stuff. I put money into it. I don't know what that is. Yeah, put money away. It's good. Hey, when you have a maintain stability, that's what it's about. It's about being able to maintain stability and not being allowed to get distracted. But, you know, okay. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. I'm going to read. What are you going to do today? Yeah. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't have retirement. I'm closing, but a lot of people don't have retirement savings. It's the home. It's their home or their pension, right? And hope that they can find a little extra scratch to get that extra money to go, you know, give the grandkids some Christmas presents, right? That's what happens, and that's it. It's an investment thing. The bank handles it, but when you dip into it, then tax you. Yeah, it is. Of course, yeah, that's right. And that's good for the economy. That you've paid some extra tax and you've made money on just ownership of something. It actually, you know, people can rail, but it helps the economy, right? Especially if that person buys the things that help their own economy, right? Dump all your money into some horrible company from overseas and that's doing bad things to destroy companies over here. Well, then you didn't really do a good thing. But yeah, well, I don't know about spoiling. That's what older people want to do. They want the love of their grandkids and, sniff some. All right. Sniff some love from the grandkids. And thanks for watching. Have a good day.